Hello and a very warm welcome to the Daily News Simplified session of the Raus IAS dated 10th of April 2024. Today in this session, we are going to take up important news and articles from three leading newspapers, that is the Hindu, the Indian Express and the Business Line. On your screen, you have the topics listed out. That is, today we have total 8 articles for discussion. But before starting with our discussion, there is a small request that if you like our initiative, then please do like, share and subscribe to our channel. Thank you. Now on this note, let's start with our first topic. The first topic is regarding the Indian monsoon, and the news in this context appears in the page 12 of the Hindu, where it reads that India is likely to record normal monsoon this year, which has been forecasted or reported by Skymet, which is a private weather forecasting agency. So there has been no official declaration in this regard, but by a private weather forecasting agency. So this topic becomes important from the perspective of GS paper 1, where you have the topic Indian geography. Under this you have the topic monsoon in India, and this has been one of the most favorite topics of UPSC in geography. As you can see in the previous year questions, like in prelims in 2017 you had a question on Indian Ocean dipole, but indirectly it was asking about its impact on this. So what is the impact and what is that, we'll see in this discussion further. Similarly, there was a question in 2014 regarding the seasonal reversal of winds, as to which type of climate does it characterize. So that also we'll see in our discussion. In mains also there have been 2 to 3 questions, which we will solve also in terms of the discussion of that question and how our discussion is going to help in the answer writing of those questions. So on this note, let's start with our discussion. Now, when you see or analyze Indian monsoon, this is not something a very modern phenomena. It has been existing for years. So its analysis also has been going for years. So in this regard, what has happened is that there were some initial theories that were given regarding how Indian monsoon originates, how it travels across India, what is its impact and all those things. And in this regard, one of the earliest theories was that regarding the land and sea breeze theory. The land and sea breeze theory was that what is happening is that under that theory, in the Indian Ocean there is a higher pressure and on the Indian land there is a lower pressure. Why? Because of the heating that is taking place. So what is happening is that you have the winds blowing from the sea towards the Indian mainland. Why? Because the wind is blowing from high pressure to low pressure area. So this was sea breeze. Then similarly you had the retreating monsoon in the form of northeastern trade winds. Why? Because now the higher pressure is on the land and lower pressure is in the sea. So what will happen? The wind will blow from where? From the land to the sea. So this was the theory regarding land and sea breeze theory about the Indian monsoon. But that is not the case. Why? Because if that was it, what is causing rain in these regions which are far away from the coast? What is causing rain there? And even the land and sea breeze phenomena, if you see, it is a diurnal phenomena, that is day and night phenomena. But this monsoon weather, it is persisting for around 4 months, say from around June to September last. So this cannot hold a valid ground on this reason. But then there came another theory. The another theory was that it is taking place on account of warming of the northern portion of Indian mainland, that is the northern India, the heating of the northern portion of India. But this is not a standalone reason. Why? Because if that is the case, today, like this year, if you see in March only, you have 37 degrees Celsius touching on mercury temperature in Delhi. If that is the case, the monsoon should start say from April, say from May. But when is it starting? From the first week or from the first 10 days of June. So definitely there is some other process or some other group of process that is contributing to the origin of monsoon and not just the heating of mainland. So in this context, what we are going to do is that we are going to understand the entirety of Indian monsoon, that is how it is originating, how it is traveling across India, how it is impacting the rainfall in different regions, how it has got impacted due to the human activities, and also some of its characteristics, so that you can frame a very good answer on the questions of Indian monsoon. So in this context, let us start with the discussion. Now what happens is that with the onset of summer season, say around April, there is a gradual heating of Indian land that is taking place, especially the northern India, this portion. Now, with gradual heating, what happens is that towards the end of May, say around end of May, a kind of intertropical convergence zone, which is called in this context as monsoon trough. Now, intertropical convergence zone is basically a low pressure area. A low pressure area develops where around the point of heating. Point of heating is where it is in the northern portion. So, a form of monsoon trough starts developing in this region, say from the Rajasthan region to the region of Chota Nagpur Plateau and Bihar. And for this reason, what happens is that by the start of early June, this monsoon trough it intensifies. That is, the low pressure area in this region, it intensifies. So to compensate that, what will happen is that we will need the winds blowing from some high pressure area. So what will be that high pressure area? Let's see in the next diagram. That is, in this diagram, if you see this portion of southern hemisphere, that is this ocean portion, a form of high pressure is developing in this area, and because of this you have what? From the 23 degree latitude line, you have southeastern trade winds blowing, and these southeastern trade winds, what is happening to them? This is the line of equator and they are crossing over now, like you can see in the black arrow. They are crossing over in the form of what? Southwestern trade winds. That is, in terms of India, we call it as southwestern monsoon winds. And as soon as they cross, they hit where? The coast of Kerala. And that is why you have the first onset of monsoon where? On the coast of Kerala. When you read the IMD criteria for declaration of onset of Indian monsoon, one of the criteria is that the arrival of rainfall in the coast of Kerala. So you have the rainfall in the coast of Kerala, and this branch, what happens to this is that it starts taking shape in the form of parallel traveling to the eastern coast, that is the coast of Tamil Nadu, and two branches develop, that is the Arabian Sea branch and the Bay of Bengal branch. Now this Arabian Sea branch starts further traveling towards the Gujarat coast, and this branch starts traveling towards the northeastern and eastern parts of India. Now here you have many hills which are categorized as Arakan hills, and what will happen is that, let me just clear some of this. Now what will happen is that there will be a deflection on the part of the hills of this monsoon winds that is coming. So it will take what? A shape of eastern winds, and that is why you have these winds called as Purvaiyas, where in the regions of Bihar, on which even you even had a question on this in this year mains, which we'll see further. And when you see this branch of Bay of Bengal branch that is traveling, it is causing what now? It is causing rainfall in the Ganga plain, heavy rainfall in the Ganga plain. And on parallel lines, what is happening is that this Arabian Sea branch is traveling, but here you have what? Here you have the Aravalis. Now this Aravalis, the traveling path of this Arabian Sea branch is parallel to the Aravalis, and that is why you do not have rainfall in this portion of Rajasthan, which is characterized as Thar desert. Now here you have situated one important phenomena, that is the jet stream. Now recall that line, that in spite of development of low pressure area in say April or May, the monsoon was not arriving. What was the reason? The reason was that a high pressure area in the form of westerly jet stream that has arrived in India from around the region of Mediterranean. What is happening? it is not letting the monsoon to arrive in these regions as such. That is, the onset of monsoon is delayed because of the prevalence of jet stream. But in this month of June, what happens is that there is a withdrawal of this jet stream, and that is why you have the winds blowing from this coast, and there is a sudden burst of rainfall. That is the sudden burst of monsoon that we call. So what will happen is that in this region of Rajasthan, there will be very scanty amount of rainfall. Why? Because the branch of rainfall, the wind that is traveling parallel to the Aravalis, and this branch will also do what? It will cause rainfall in this area, and a parallel branch is traveling from the eastern side. So there will be rainfall on account of both Arabian Sea branch and Bay of Bengal branch, where in this Ganga plain region, and that is why you have so much of agricultural activity taking place in this region, because of fertile soil and heavy amount of rainfall that is taking place. But the most abundant amount of rainfall is taking place where? In this region of northeastern India, and also in the region of where? The Kerala coast. But when you look at Tamil Nadu, what you see is that the winds, this summer monsoon winds have blown parallel to this Tamil Nadu coast. And due to this parallel blowing of the winds, this coast remains devoid of rainfall during the summer aspect. That is during the summer monsoon. We also have a winter monsoon that we'll see. So because of that, what happens is that there is very little amount of rainfall on the Tamil Nadu coast, and maximum rainfall is in the northeastern India, and that is why you have a place in Meghalaya by the name of Mizoram, where you have the highest average rainfall globally as per some data. And in this region of Rajasthan and Gujarat, you have a very minimal amount of rainfall, for the reason that firstly it is blowing parallel to this region, and the moisture that is there in terms of the other branches, that is not present in this. And that is why if you see this aspect, that this is the shape of the southwestern monsoon winds, and you can see it is blowing parallel to this, and it is entering India as a Bay of Bengal branch here and causing rainfall, and a southwest monsoon winds here. Then you see what here, the rainfall pattern. If you see, then you will observe that on this coast there is a dark blue line. Why? Because this is the first place where the monsoon winds hit, and that is why there is heavy amount of rainfall. But there is what? Western Ghat situated here, and you have orographic rainfall. But this side you have leeward side of this Western Ghats, and on the leeward side you do not have enough amount of rainfall, and that is why if you see, this is light blue, that is less amount of rainfall. And similarly, if you see in this region of northeast, this is dark blue, that is heavy amount of rainfall. And gradually as you travel from the east to west, from in the Ganga valley, in the Ganga plain, what will happen is that the amount of rainfall will decrease. Why? Because the moisture that was there in the initial phase, that is getting reduced in that wind. And similarly, if you see this portion, that is here, if you see, this is called Thar desert, and this is lying where? On the west side of Aravalis, from this direction if you see. And because of the low amount of rainfall, or very low, very kind of scant amount of rainfall, you have what? A development of desert taking place in this region. So this is the summer monsoon that is setting up. But you have what? A winter monsoon also in India, and the winter monsoon is on the for the reason why? Because you have the low pressure area developing here. Why? Because in June you have sun overhead at Tropic of Cancer, and you have the Tropic of Cancer here. So what will happen is that there will be a lot of intensification, that is low pressure area. But with the passage of months, September and October, what will happen is that sun will start shifting southwards, and that is when you see in November or December you have summers in Australia. So as soon as the sun starts shifting southwards, what will happen is that this monsoon trough will also start shifting southward, that is the intertropical convergence zone. So what will happen is that the winds will now start blowing towards this low pressure area, that is towards the direction of trough. And in this regard, what will happen? This will we call northeastern trade winds. That is winds causing monsoonal rainfall in when? In winter. And that is why you have the summer monsoon as southwestern monsoon and the winter monsoon as northeastern monsoon. And this will cause rainfall where? On this Tamil Nadu coast. It will hit this coast. And that is why you see in this portion you have a much higher amount of rainfall in spite of the reason that the summer monsoon is not causing enough rainfall. But still you have a lot of rainfall for the reason of winter monsoon or retreating monsoon. And that is why you have such high amount of rice cultivation taking place in this regions. Similarly, if you see in the Andaman and Nicobar regions here, the cyclonic depressions develop in this phase, that is during the winter monsoon, and that is why they cause cyclonic activity where on the eastern coast of India. For example, during the month of October and November, you may hear that a cyclone is predicted on the coast of say Odisha or on the coast of say Tamil Nadu, but you do not hear the same kind of news for them in the summer season. But when you talk about Gujarat or say around Maharashtra, you have the cyclonic activity around in the summer monsoon season. So this is the summer monsoon and the winter monsoon. This is the path. This is the northeastern trade winds. Onset of monsoon and withdrawal of monsoon. Now, when you see the monsoon of India, it is just not influenced by the factors that are peculiar to India, but also some global circulations and global phenomena. Now, what are those? Because UPSC has asked questions on those phenomena, so it is important to understand. Now, firstly, you have a phenomena of mascarene high. Now, mascarene high is nothing but a development of high pressure area around this mascarene island, and because of this development of high pressure area around the mascarene island in the southern hemisphere, what will happen is that this monsoon winds will travel at a higher speed. That is, intensification of this monsoon winds will take place towards where? India. So if the mascarene high is very well developed, so what will happen is that India will witness more amount of rainfall. So it will have a favorable impact on the monsoon of India. That is the summer monsoon of India. Similarly, you have the Indian Ocean Dipole. Now, Indian Ocean Dipole is basically about the variation in sea surface temperatures of the Western Indian Ocean and the Eastern Indian Ocean. So when you have a higher temperature in the Western Indian Ocean, you call it as positive Indian Ocean Dipole, and this positive Indian Ocean Dipole holds positive results for the Indian monsoon. That is, it brings more amount of rainfall in terms of Indian monsoon, the positive Indian Ocean Dipole. And when you have negative, that is on the if there is a warmer temperature, if there is a higher temperature on the eastern coast of Indian Ocean or the eastern surface of Indian Ocean, then there will be a relatively lower amount of rainfall in India, that is during the monsoon. So this is the impact of Indian Ocean Dipole. And then you have the major impact of El Nino and La Nina years. Now, El Nino and La Nina activity, although it is taking place in the Pacific Ocean, as you see here, but its impact is global in the sense that Indian monsoon during the El Nino witnesses much lower amount of rainfall during the El Nino, but during the La Nina phase, Indian monsoon witnesses a much higher amount of rainfall. So this is the impact of global circulations on Indian monsoon. So it is just not limited to the heating and cooling of the Indian mainland as such. Remember this thing. Now, when you see, there are certain human impacts or the anthropogenic impacts that have impacted the pattern of Indian monsoon, the amount of rainfall that is there, the variability that is associated with the Indian rainfall, Indian monsoonal rainfall. And what are those impacts? Impacts in the sense like deforestation activities, impacts in the sense like more amount of aerosol emissions that is causing changes in the condensation pattern in terms of the rainfall. So that is why you have the impact of humans impacting what? The rainfall. For example, if you see, there is a data that suggests that since 1951, what has happened is that the amount of summer monsoon rainfall, it has decreased by around 6 to 10%. Decreased by around 6 to 10%. Similarly, if you see on this, traditionally, where do you have a higher amount of rainfall? That is on the eastern side of India and on this coast, that is Kerala coast and all those regions. But now what is happening is that these regions are witnessing a relatively lower amount of rainfall in comparison to the traditional value. But these regions which were traditionally witnessing lower amount of rainfall, they are getting much higher rainfall. So there is a form of variability and irregularity in the rainfall pattern. Similarly, the intermittent nature of the rainfall, monsoonal rainfall, is increasing. That is, wet and dry spells have intensified, and these are some of what the human induced impacts on the like Indian monsoon. Why human induced? Because it is on account of the climate change, and climate change in present era is said to be anthropogenic in nature, and that is why this is the humanizing impact on Indian monsoon. Now there are certain characteristics also of the Indian monsoon, such as, when you see the characteristics, it is seasonal in nature. Why seasonal in nature? Because from June to September, what are you having? That is, you are having southwestern monsoon. Southwestern monsoon in the sense that the summer monsoon. But after a span of 4 months, you have the withdrawal of monsoon that you call as retreating monsoon, which causes the rainfall on the Tamil Nadu coast. So there is what a seasonal flow of winds taking place, and that is why in that PYQ, if you see initially, the seasonal withdrawal of winds is a characteristic of what type of climate? That is monsoonal type of climate, and it is taking place on account of what? Multitude of process, such as development of low and high pressure areas, withdrawal of southwestern tropical jet stream, subtropical jet stream that is there. Then what do you have? You have that it is in it is in parallel with the harvesting season in India. Harvesting means the cropping season in India basically. That is, the major cropping activity in India is taking place when? During the monsoonal phase. And in terms of the summer monsoon, 90% of rainfall in India is taking place when? During the summer monsoon. So these are some basic characteristics. That is, complex process means it is not just the India limited factors, the factors limited to India that are like impacting the monsoon, but also some global factors we saw, that is El Nino, La Nina, Indian Ocean dipole, and all those factors. So these are some characteristics that you can write when it is asked that what are the characteristics of monsoon climate. Now when you see these are some maps that you can refer, like it is showing as to how there is onset of monsoon, firstly on the coast of Kerala, and then over the eastern India, and then the western India, and all those regions. Now when you see some questions that were asked, for example, it was asked that why is the southwest monsoon called Purvaiya in Bhojpur region, and how has the directional seasonal wind system influenced the cultural ethos? So why it is called? Because it is getting deflected in this region by the Arakan Hills, and account of this region, it is requiring a flow direction of eastern side, and that is why the Purvaiyas. And there are some cultural ethos. For example, the harvest festivals that are celebrated, there are some songs composed on those regions, and similar points you can write as to how it has impacted the cultural ethos. Now when you see the next question, this question was there in the very 2023 mains. Now when you see the next question, that how far do you agree that behavior of the Indian monsoon has been changing due to humanizing landscapes? So you can write about the anthropogenic impact on the Indian monsoon that were discussed in terms of the data. That is 6 to 10% reduction. Then in the traditional areas it has been reducing, and all those impacts. Then the third question that was there in 2017, this was in 2015, and again in 2017. So you can see the importance of this topic, that is the Indian monsoon, how repeatedly this has been asked in the UPSC mains. Now the question is, what characteristic can be assigned to monsoon climate? So it is asking about the characteristic. So you can talk about various characteristics as to what is the process itself, what it is composed of, how does it last, how does it withdraw, what are some like other socio-economic activities that is taking place in congruence to this, that is the cropping activities in India, and all those as characteristic. So with this discussion, what you can do is that you can write a sample answer on all these questions. Okay, now with this discussion, now let's move to the next topic. Now the next topic is basically in the context of an article that has been written by Miss Soumya Swaminathan, who talks about basically that climate crisis that we currently witness, and we are witnessing a phase of climate change. It is not gender neutral. Not gender neutral in the sense that the impact and the effect of this climate crisis, it is just not limited to, or it is not equitably impacting all the genders. And this article is especially in the context of women, that is, the climate crisis is disproportionately impacting women. And how it is so, we'll see in our discussion. So this appears on the page 6 of the Hindu and becomes important from the perspective of GS paper 1, where you have the topic Indian society, and specifically you have the mentioning of the term women, that is policies related to women and their situation. And as you can see, in 2021 mains, there was a question regarding what is the role of gig economy in the process of empowerment of women. So a topic maybe of economy or any other sector, but if it has any intersection with the empowerment or some issues of the women, then definitely UPSC can ask. So if climate change is having some relevance for this topic in terms of women centric, then there can be a question related to both of them, that is how climate crisis has adversely impacted the women. So in this context, let us understand this topic. Now we'll first understand what sort of impact the author has talked about, and in this context, the first impact that the author has talked about is the disproportionate health risk and mortality. That is, the health risk and mortality rate on account of climate change is higher disproportionately on women, and this has also been validated by a report of UNDP, where it has stated that women and children are 14 times more likely to die in a climate disaster. That is the assertion of UNDP's report. And similarly, if you see, like for example, there are many social obligations imposed on women, and in fulfillment of those obligations, what happens is that they become more vulnerable to this climate crisis. For example, if some women is undergoing pregnancy, then what happens is that they become more vulnerable to diseases like eclampsia, on account of what? The impacts of the climate change. For example, when you see the NFHS data, NFHS 5th round data states that women are what? Women in terms of anemia, 57% women are anemic. And in terms of men, if you see, it is just around 31%. So in the existing circumstances, that is in the status quo, already women are lacking in health parameters. And when they are like already vulnerable so much in terms of health sector, what will happen is that with the inducement of the effect of climate change, the health impact on the women will be more. That is, there may be a chance that more number of women may become anemic, because why? There may be other risk that we will see, that is food and nutrition insecurity and all those things. Similarly, if you see, there is a issue of indoor air pollution. Like there has been a report by Lancet also, which states that lakhs of people in India die just due to air pollution, indoor air pollution. And in case of India, if you see, what is happening is that currently, as per the time use survey of NSO, majority of the domestic work, it is being done by whom? The women. And in doing those domestic work, they are subjected to more time in terms of the indoor air pollution, that is the air pollution that is taking place inside the house. So on account of that, maybe cardiovascular diseases or maybe some respiratory diseases that is more common among the women. So this is what? Disproportionate health risk and mortality. Similarly, you have the issue of water and sanitation. Now this picture that you saw, this is a very common picture, especially in some states that are more drought prone and all those areas. So what is happening is that in terms of water and sanitation, the water collection activity, that is collecting water from say some well or some far flung areas, it is mostly imposed, the responsibility of that work is mostly imposed on women. Now if you see, because of the climate change, water scarcity and water stress is also a issue that has been rising. So what will happen is that the time spent by women on these activities, that is the non-productive activities, it will increase. So the burden of all these works will increase on women. Similarly, in terms of sanitation, if you see, when there is a climate disaster or any such issue, what will happen is that maintaining hygiene in terms of say menstrual hygiene in these areas, it becomes quite difficult for women. So overall there is an impact on what, their time is getting spent more where, on the water collection activities. And secondly, when they want to go for more hygienic practices, say for menstrual hygiene, their accessibility to resources and time is itself curtailed. Then you have agriculture and livelihood vulnerabilities. Now when you see 80% of women in rural areas, and overall also if you see, it is around 75 to 80% that they are employed where, in agriculture. And economic survey has stated that, that is economic survey of 2017 and 18 has stated that the climate change will do what, it will reduce the or decline the income of farmers by around 15 to 18% in irrigated areas and around 20 to 25% in unirrigated areas. And since so many women are employed in agriculture, what will happen is that their income source will decline. That is, first of all, the activity as such and the kind of income that is being generated from that activity. So that will impact what, their livelihood opportunities. And fourthly, food and nutritional insecurity, in the sense that with so many anemic women, if the agricultural activity is impacted, if the hygienic activity is impacted, then what will happen is that they will become more vulnerable to food and nutritional insecurity, which they still are disproportionately higher in terms of the percentage. When you look at the NFHS data and other data, the food insecurity and the malnutrition among the women, among the female sections, is quite high as compared to their male counterparts. So what will climate change do is that it will aggravate those parameters. It will aggravate those parameters. But these needs to be addressed, and so on that account, let's see what is the way forward. What is the way forward? Now the way forward is that firstly you need to empower women in climate solutions. What exactly do we mean, that is empower women in climate solution? That is making women as key agent. Key agent means that women should not only be the subject of such policies, but they should be what, given the agency to be the drivers of such policy. And we can take lessons from what, the past environmental movements such as the Chipko movement. This was an environmental conservation movement that was driven by women itself. So there has been a past history in India, and taking lesson from that, what we can do is that we can give more agency to women in policies that we are undertaking for mitigating the climate change impacts. So that is why we should make them the drivers of the solutions in climate change. And how we can do it? By one major change, that is revising policy with gender perspective. Gender perspective means we should be considerate of the aspect of the fact that since the climate crisis is impacting genders of male and female disproportionately, so our policies should also be in a tailor made, in a it should be curated to the needs of that particular gender. That is, it should be more gender sensitive. So a kind of gender sensitization of policy is needed. Gender sensitization means more amount of funds should go, for example, for women farmers when we are talking about agriculture. Say for example, when we are promoting eco tourism in say hilly areas, we should give more weightage to women beneficiaries and all those aspects. That is a more gender sensitized approach in policy making. And then we should address the heat waves and water shortages. addressing the heat waves and water shortages, because some changes have already taken place which cannot be reversed for say for that matter. And what we can do is that we can make a more adaptive strategy so that their impact, say for example on women, is minimized. So for that, what we can do is that we can prepare, for example, a more robust heat action plans. We can provide, more, incentive for say eco-friendly cities. Eco-friendly cities means the green blue spaces kind of concept that has developed, whereby more green cover and all those things should be promoted in the cities. Then electricity should be provided 24 hours, for the reason that they should be able to run their cooling appliances in that regard. So these are some of the steps. You can read other steps also in the PDF. So these are some of the steps that can be taken in terms of the impact that has already taken place. So also what we can do is one last step, that is community led resilience. Community led resilience in the sense that you have the local body called panchayats, and also the urban counterpart. But when you see the amount of power in terms of policy making to tackle climate change that has been given to panchayats, that is quite less. So what we need to do is that there is a very famous concept of localization of SDGs, and 2 or 3 SDGs directly deal with the climate change, such as SDG 13 with climate change, SDG 14 about the ocean conservation, SDG 15 about the land conservation and all those things. So what we can do is that there is a need for localization of SDGs, which is possible by devolving more power, more funds to whom? The local institutions such as panchayats. So these are some basic set of steps that was suggested by author. Now let's move to the next topic. Now the next topic is in the context of the recent visit of US Treasury Secretary, that is Janet Yellen, who traveled to Beijing and had a 4-day meet with with her Chinese counterpart. But the issue is that there has been no major breakthrough in terms of conclusive agreement. So in this article written by the very famous C. Rajamohan, he basically tries to articulate about the contestation and the cooperation that has been going on between China and USA, and about the overall strategy of USA towards China, especially in the Indo-Pacific region. So in this context, let us understand some aspects that has been highlighted by the article. Why? Because it becomes important from the perspective of GS paper 2, the topic being international relations. Okay, now let's see what basically the author talks about. Now the author talks about 4 dimensions, and one of this is that navigating relations with China. Now basically the Joe Biden administration has come out with a Chinese strategy named responsible competition. Now the responsible competition strategy basically states that USA will cooperate with China wherever it is possible. USA will cooperate with China wherever it is possible, but will confront it whenever necessary. And on account of this, what is happening is that USA in some sectors, it is trying to pacify China, or you say do away with the tensions that has been persisting, and in some sectors it has been openly confronting. For example, in the Bali summit of G20, that is summit before India, in the Bali summit, what happened was that there was a communication, or there was some meeting that had taken place between Joe Biden and his Chinese counterpart, that is Xi Jinping. And similarly, there was also a meeting that took place on the platform of Asia Pacific Economic Cooperation when Xi Jinping traveled for the summit in USA. So in that regard, in some sectors, USA is looking to diffuse the tensions. But when you look at some of the statements, such as USA openly endorsing, some sort of sovereignty for Taiwan, and sending its military shipments in the coast of like in the South China Sea. So this shows that wherever USA considers it is necessary, it is going for confrontation. So this is what it is, responsible competition strategy of USA for China. Secondly, what is US doing is that it is actively engaging with Japan. Like just now, like yesterday only, the Japanese Prime Minister has like Mr. Fumio Kishida. He has traveled to USA, and USA basically is trying to develop a very strong and very strengthened form of relationship with Japan, because it is one of the major stakeholders in this Indo-Pacific region. How? By the military and in the sectors of military and technology. That is, in technology, Japan is highly advanced, and in military, what is happening is that Japanese PM has openly stated that Japan is going to increase its defense budget, in the sense that it is going to spend more in terms of defense capabilities, as so as to counter the regional threats that have been developing, and this has been actively promoted by US as such. Also, there has been a chip 4 alliance that has been launched with countries like USA, Japan, South Korea, and Taiwan. That is the chip 4 alliance. So this is how USA is basically trying to make Japan the linchpin of its Indo-Pacific strategy, as it is a very close neighbor of China. So it can act as a proxy, as I know, proxy is a like a candidate for USA in the region of Indo-Pacific. Similarly, if you see, there is a new avatar of AUKUS that has been talked about. That is, in strengthening of this relationship with Japan, what is USA trying to do is that it is trying to make Japan join AUKUS. AUKUS currently has 3 states, that is Australia, United Kingdom, and USA. Now, with the entry of Japan, USA is basically trying to create a form of security network around the region of China. So this is how the new avatar of AUKUS is being designed. Maybe later stage, South Korea can also be induced to join this AUKUS. So a form of military alliance can be developed in this form. Similarly, the fourth aspect is the Asian security network. In terms of USA, though not directly, it is trying to give support to states that are not aligned with China's policy. For example, states of Philippines. And previously, before the regime change in Maldives, USA was also supporting military upgradation of the state of Maldives. So what is happening is that small scale kind of military alliances is being promoted by US, so that although not directly confronting China, it can by providing say support to these smaller nations, it can interfere in those matters where China is involved in the Indo-Pacific. So this is how USA-China relations has been progressing. Now with this topic, let's with the discussion of this topic, now let's move to the next one. Now the next topic is basically regarding the angel tax and its valuation, and this news appears on the page 3 of the business line, whereby there has been a decision of the Delhi High Court that angel tax valuation method will be decided by the person or the entity who is paying the angel tax and not by the income tax authority. But a form of discretion has been given to the income tax authority, in the sense that if it is not satisfied with the valuation method, then it can reject that valuation, but it cannot reject that method as such. But we'll get more clarity as soon as we learn about the valuation method and what is the basic contestation. So this topic becomes important from the perspective of GS paper 3, that is Indian economy. Now in this, let us understand firstly what is angel tax, and then we will see basically what is the issue with its valuation. Now when you see, there are two kind of companies, that is listed and unlisted. That is companies that are listed on the stock market and companies that are not listed on the stock market. Now what will happen is that The companies that are listed, they can raise their capital through share by, like you subscribe to some share of the company, so they can raise the share through like capital through share market. But what about the unlisted companies? How will they raise share like the capital? So for them, the basically provision is that either some form of venture capitalist invest in their startup, or some form of other form of investment which we call as angel investor. Say for example, there is a person A who is going for a startup, and there is a person B who is an angel investor. Now what will happen is that this person A will talk to B that they want some form of investment, and this person B, say for example, says that for 50% share I will give you 100 crores, for example. So there is a form of money exchange and share exchange taking place outside the share market, and the valuation of the share has taken place on their own negotiation, that is 100 crore for 50% of share. Now the issue starts here that, for example, what if this B is trying to go for money laundering, that is launder 100 crore of rupees in the name of investment in some Indian company. He invests 100 crore and then he starts demanding some lucrative provisions, for example buying a car, or for example buying some Europe tour ticket on account what, that he's in the, say, board of director of the company. So you can buy in the name of company using those 100 crores. So what is he doing? Basically he's trying to use that illegal money through the channel of this startup. So what happened was that due to this issue, the government in 2012 came out with the concept of angel tax by amending the Income Tax Act. And basically it was said that whatever amount is raised above the fair market value, say for example, if the fair market value is 1 crore and you raise a amount of around 10 crore, then on the additional amount you would have to pay income tax on that, angel tax under the Income Tax Act. So what happened was that the issue arose that how will you calculate this fair market value, that whether the value of the share is 1 crore or 10 crore, how will you calculate? So herein you have two basic methods, that is discounted cash flow method and the net asset value method. Now what happens is that in the discounted cash flow method, for example, I have a company and I have a person who believes that in future this company is going to be one of the major big tech companies. So what he will do is that he will value my share highly. On what account? That in future it will get more cash to that investor, that is, it will get more profit. So for example, he values my share at around 100 crore, same data, for 50%. Why? For the reason, not because this is the present situation, but basically the investor believes that since he has belief in me and overall like the strategy of the company, he thinks that this company can earn so much amount in future, so let's invest this much amount for that much share. So it is based on what? A futuristic outlook that in future this company will be profitable. So that is why discounted cash flow. The second one is that it is based on what is your present net asset, that is, you may be having certain asset and you may be having certain liabilities. So what is your net asset, that is asset minus liabilities. Based on that your share will be evaluated, that is net asset value divided by the share, and that will be your share value. And what is happening is that the income tax authorities are trying to go for net asset value method, but some companies, they are going for discounted cash flow method. So what has Delhi High Court said, that while choosing this method, it will be the discretion of the company, that is a startup, but the income tax authority will have a right to reject that valuation. That is, maybe if a company states a value of 100 crore for its share in through the discounted cash flow method, then the income tax authority can say that they do not agree with this value, but they cannot say that the company cannot use this method. This is the entirety. And when you talk about the angel tax, remember one thing, that this angel tax is not just on the resident investors, but also on the non-resident. So both resident and non-resident investors are covered under it. And it is not imposed on all kinds of startups, but startups, for example, there is exemption that startups that are registered with DPIT, that is Department for Promotion of Industry and Internal Trade. Those startups that are registered with this, they will be exempted from this provision of angel tax. Remember this point. Now, based on this discussion, let's solve the MCQ. Now, consider the following statements about the angel tax. That is, it is a tax levied on the capital raised through issue of shares above the fair market value by the listed companies. Now, this makes the statement wrong because it is for the unlisted companies. So, it is not just startups, but basic difference is the unlisted companies, as we saw initially here, the unlisted companies. The second statement is that the tax is applicable for investments received from both resident and non-resident investors, which is a correct statement. So, second statement is correct. The third statement says that startups registered with Department of Promotion of Industry and Internal Trade are exempted, which is also correct statement. So, how many statements given are correct? Only 2. That is B answer. Now, let's move to the next article. Now, the next article is basically in the context of God particle, whose concept was proposed by Peter Higgs, who has just died yesterday. And in this context, this news appears on the page 14 of the Hindu, and it becomes important from the perspective of GS paper 3, that is science and technology. And as you can see in previous year question in 2013, you had a question regarding the Higgs boson particle. So similarly, you can have a question related to this concept in some other manner. So for that purpose, let's discuss this topic. Now, basically, when you see the standard model of physics, in standard model of physics, you have two kinds of particles, that is fermions and bosons. Now, fermions are those particles that have mass, and bosons are those particles that basically characterize force. Under the fermions, you have leptons and quarks. Now, leptons basically they exist in an independent form, in a single independent form. For example, electron, for example, neutrinos. And quarks basically they exist. This is neutrinos, not neutrons. Okay, and basically quarks they exist in groups. That is, say, protons, neutrons. So this is fermions. Similarly, you have bosons, boson particle. In boson, you have Madala particles, Madala boson basically, and this Madala boson is seen responsible for giving mass, for imparting mass to what? Dark matter, which comprises around 27% of the universe. Similarly, you have the Higgs boson, and this is where this concept comes, Higgs boson, that is the God particle. This concept was basically proposed by Peter Higgs in 1964, who basically promulgated a theory that when initial Big Bang, that the Big Bang phase happened, the initial expansion of universe did not let the particles obtain any kind of mass. But as soon as the universe started cooling, a form of force field started to develop. A form of force field started to develop, and the particles which were interacting with this force field, they were getting mass. And that is why this Higgs boson, which is also called as God particle, is seen as responsible for imparting force to this first fermion. That is force, this is mass to the first particle, which is the fermion. Just a minute. So this is Higgs boson. Then thirdly, you have the gauge, where you have three categories, that is Z and W boson, which symbolize weak nuclear force. Then you have basically photons that symbolize electromagnetic force. Then lastly, what do you have is that gluon, and they symbolize strong nuclear force. So this is the basic characterization of particle in the standard physics model. And remember that photons, it does not interact with the Higgs field, and that is why they do not have any mass. Now based on this, let's solve the MCQ. Consider the following statements, that is the Higgs boson is a fundamental particle responsible for the existence of gravitational field. This is not the case, as we have seen in the discussion. Now secondly, it states that particles which do not interact with the Higgs field are massless, which is a correct statement. So the correct answer is B, that is 2 only. Now let's discuss the next topic, that is the lavender cultivation. Now this topic basically appears on the page 15 of the Indian Express, and it is basically applauding the success of this mission in Jammu and Kashmir, particularly in the Doda district of Jammu, where the introduction of this lavender cultivation under the purple revolution, of which ministry? Ministry of Science and Tech. Remember, this is not Ministry of Agriculture, Ministry of Science and Tech, through the institution of CSIR, under the provision of National Aroma Mission. So with the introduction of this, what has happened is that the farmers or the people who engaged in this activity, they have witnessed increase in their income and overall improvement in their lifestyle. In that context, it becomes important from the perspective of Indian geography, GS paper 1. And in 2016, you had a kind of question on this mission, that is nutritional security through millet promotion. So similarly, you can have a question on, say, National Aroma Mission or lavender cultivation or purple revolution. What is purple revolution as such? So in that regard, let's discuss the lavender cultivation. Now lavender cultivation, if you see the climatic aspect of this cultivation, basically it requires warm and sunny days. In that regard, it requires around 6 to 8 hours of sunlight on a daily basis, and Mediterranean type of climate is preferable as such. But remember this line, that it does not exist in humid conditions. Remember this line. Similarly, in terms of soil, what does it prefer? Acidic soil? No, not acidic soil. It prefers well drained alkaline soil. And in terms of ideal nature, it is the sandy and loamy soils that are preferred. In terms of water requirement, what is it? Although the overall water requirement of lavender cultivation is not very high, but in the initial phases it requires a regular watering. And in terms of fertilizer usage, it has very minimalistic consumption of fertilizer in its cultivation. The resistance to pest and disease is relatively high in lavender cultivation as compared to traditional crops or other crops such as maize that was being cultivated erstwhile where in the Doda district of Jammu. And other features such as what should be the pattern of plantation and spacing between the plants, that is there should be a gap of around 12 to 18 inches, so for some sort of, say, air circulation in that. So based on this discussion, let's solve the MCQ. With reference to lavender cultivation in India, consider the following statements. That is, it is native to India and grown in relatively wetter conditions. No, it is not favorable where in humid conditions. So this statement is wrong. Now it prefers well drained and highly acidic soils. This statement is also wrong. Why? Because it prefers alkaline soils. Thirdly, Ministry of Agriculture and Farmer Welfare initiated this purple revolution. This is wrong because it is Ministry of Science and technology. So all the three statements are wrong. So answer is D, that is none of the statement is correct. Now let's go to the next topic. The next topic is basically in the context of a report that has appeared in the Indian Express on the very first page, which is a report by WHO titled Global Hepatitis Report, and it says that currently India ranks second in terms of the hepatitis cases, whereby in terms of hepatitis B it is just second to China, and in terms of hepatitis C it is just second to Pakistan. And this topic becomes important from the perspective of GS paper 3, that is science and technology. And as you can see in previous year question 2017, there was a question on Zika virus. Similarly, you can have a question on a virus that causes hepatitis, that is we are going to understand. Now basically hepatitis is basically what this is basically symbolizes inflammation, and hepatic is basically used to symbolize liver. So this is what inflammation of the liver as such. Now there are basically 5 types of hepatitis that exist, that is A, B, C, D, E. But major concern is with the B and C because they are majorly responsible for the hepatitis in like virus induced diseases in human, especially of the chronic nature. And in this context, hepatitis B and C, if you see, they are basically transferred through certain processes, such as when you come in contact with some contaminated blood, through maybe some sexual intercourse activity, maybe through mother to child infection that can take place, through contaminated injection that can happen when you share some personal items such as razors and all, something where there is a transfer of bodily fluids, you can say. So in that regard, this is hepatitis B and C and their way of getting transferred. Now based on that discussion, let's solve this MCQ regarding the hepatitis infection. Now hepatitis is an acute inflammation of the small intestine. This is wrong. Why? This is liver. Then vaccines for hepatitis B and C are provided under the Universal Immunization Program of India, which is also an incorrect statement, because for hepatitis B currently there is a vaccine and it is being provided under the Universal Immunization Program. But when you talk about C, currently there is no as such vaccine for this virus. So this statement becomes wrong. Then thirdly, the National Virus Hepatitis Control Program of India aims its elimination by the year 2030. So this statement is correct. So the correct answer will be only one, that is A only. Now the last topic basically is in the context of the transfer of 20,000 elephants from Botswana to Germany as a form of gift. Now we will not go into detail of this news, but understand it from the perspective of UPSC, whereby in 2020 you had a question on Indian elephants directly asking some minute aspects of this animal. So in that context, this becomes important from the perspective of GS paper 3, the topic of environment. So let's solve just one MCQ on this topic, whereby consider the following statements: that India has world's largest number of elephants in the world. So this is the wrong statement. Why? Because it is Botswana that has the highest number of elephants. So this is one fact that has come up from this news. And second, so this is wrong statement. Secondly, it says that Karnataka has the highest number of elephants in India, which is the correct statement. So what will be the correct answer? Just B, that is 2 only. So this is all for today. Take care and thank you.